ever-growing extremism, global military modernizations, rise of disruptive technologies, and renewed risks of military conflicts in the Middle East and South Asia are ringing alarm bells. All in all, we don't live in a friendly environment or a satisfactory geopolitical situation. Pakistan has faced a lot of challenges in the realm of traditional and non-traditional security threats since its inception, due to the disputes bequeathed to Pakistan as a consequence of partition of the subcontinent. India and Pakistan have fought wars in 1947, 48, 65, and 71. There have also been near wars in 99, 2002, and 2019 very recently. The tense peace with and undiminishing hostility from India is a major factor of our insecurity and instability. Pakistan's traditional security challenges have increased manifold, with Hindu nationalist party BJP coming to power in India and displaying hatred and jingoistic mindset openly. During Pulwama crisis, Pakistan exhibited what it was capable of in comparison to its 5 times larger neighbor. However, Indian war hysteria has no end. The Modi government went on to challenge global norms and illegally annexed Indian occupied Kashmir, and since then India has imposed the siege on common Kashmiri people. What option does Pakistan have? Pakistan's initial diplomacy has delivered some results in exposing India's fascist face at the global stage. But will diplomacy work in securing Kashmir's future? Will Pakistan continue to look towards the global community, which has failed to put enough pressure on India to lift Kashmir from Kashmir? Will Pakistan be just a concerned onlooker while Kashmiris are facing systematic subjugation, oppression, torture, and even worse, an ethnic cleansing? Ladies and gentlemen, India made the move in IOK discerning against Pakistan. This points to a larger malaise that afflicts us. The primary reason why our nation has not been able to attain a level of development and progress commensurate with our potential is lack of governance. Our governments have not performed as governments should normally do. In turn, there are many reasons for that. Slogans have substituted for performance. Our founding fathers charted a way forward in identifying 5 elements in the objectives resolution. They were freedom, democracy, equality, social justice, and tolerance. As we stand or sit here today in 2019, we see that in each of the domains, we are worse off today than when these objectives were fixed. Why so? Well, it is because we thought it sufficient to identify these lofty objectives, but didn't do anything to achieve these objectives or actualize the intent. The attainment of the same needed visionary conception, painstaking planning, and rigorous implementation. Traits that so far none of our governments has been able to demonstrate. Each of the identified objectives needed launching of multiple multi-year projects running in parallel for their attainment. For example, for the attainment of equality, one needed inter alia, equality of opportunity, equality before law, rule of merit and selection, appointment, promotion, award and reward. Consider what it would have taken to bring about a system that would have done all this. Similarly, in the domain of freedom, a progressive nation needs personal, political, media, market and rule of law freedoms. Do we have them? The most likely answer is a no. One could find equally numerous issues related to the subjects of social justice and tolerance, and how to make those prevalent and effective. Ladies and gentlemen, all our governments, whether military-led or civilian, have had concerns for the legitimacy and political survival. They did not or were not allowed to work in peace. Consequently, in the last 7 decades, the conception and actualization of grand national projects were few and far between. provide for basic needs of the citizens. Unfortunately, they have not been a constant fear of our governance structure. They exist sometimes and don't at other times. They have found favor during the tenure of military-led governments who wanted to undercut the political power of major parties. Whenever civil governments regained power, they reversed or diluted the role of local governments. But the worst aspect of local government was that mayors, deputy mayors, and councillors had no clue of governance. They had not been educated or trained in public policy and administration. That's why the performance of local governments has been dismal and inconsistent. As I indicated earlier, the state has always been concerned with its own security. So it paid or could pay scant attention and gave low priority to people's security, which essentially delivers security and stability to a country. Also, in these 72 years, no government has evidently been able to identify national interests. Be that as it may, how can vital interests be defended when they have not been defined or are agreed upon? Our national interests are identified in periodic huddles of a cabinet or two pillars of the state, usually without a debate in the parliament. Nothing usually is reduced to writing and no periodic formal review is done if and when the geostrategic or regional situation changes. We have added to our problems and not resolved any that we inherited. Take the case of our identity. Allama Iqbal emphasized the notion of Ummah over the nation state, so the youth is confused whether to fight for Ummah or the state of Pakistan, as was witnessed during our war on terror. Our state was aligned with non-Muslim West, while our general public had sympathies for Muslim Taliban and their associates. Similarly, we have not been able to arrive at a consensus as a nation whether the Qaid wanted us to be a secular state or an Islamic state. People quote his speeches selectively to support their argument. Whatever he may have intended, our leaders since then should have figured it out, who we are and what should we do. Another enigma of our polity has been the determination whether all organs or pillars of the state are on the same page or not. We must be an exception in the world as a country where this kind of guessing game goes on endlessly. The Constitution has defined the roles of all organs of the state. Why should they all not be pulling in the same direction? We think law and order is one animal. They are not. So we always try to restore order without resort to law, which results in tyranny. In 21st century, no just society should condone tyranny. So we come back to our topic, our quest for security and stability. So far, to secure the state, we aligned with the USA as part of SEATO and CENTO. That only enhanced American security. This arrangement did provide us military and economic aid, but did not enable or ensure our safety in 1965 and 71 wars. In fact, we were sanctioned. So we had to turn to China with almost the same consequences. We then realized that we had to rely on and enhance our strength, both economic and military, to ensure our stability and security. However, we never were able to manage that. Our political instability obviated our economic and social development. In 1956, 1979, 2001, we offered our services to the Americans for attainment of their global objectives. The reimbursements for these services only bridged our balance of payment gaps and provided some military equipment, but we remained exposed to the whims of our creditors. Most American presidents have asked us endlessly to do more. The bitter reality is that no debtor nation can be stable or secure. Ladies and gentlemen, there have been two types of eras. One, usually the military-led, where we have been pressurized by American establishment for the attainment of their global objectives. And two, civilian rule, where we have been cornered by international financial institutions because we have been unable to balance our budget. The financial pressures have been lesser during the first case because there were no economic caveats to the aid given. Only facilitation for the military objectives attainment was required. In the second case, the IMF imposed severe financial conditionalities which resulted in hardships for the common man. Thus, in both cases, stability eluded us. The unending political instability only made things worse. On the positive side, ladies and gentlemen, we are a nuclear-armed nation with strong armed forces, which have so far saved us from a fate similar to Iraq, Libya, and Afghanistan. They have been a source of stability in the face of continued political fragmentation. The reason that they are generally better than other organizations is that they are by and large merit-based organizations, providing a reasonable and decent working and living environment. Our future generation holds a lot of promise. Our professionals like doctors, engineers, IT experts, lawyers, economists, etc., have earned a good reputation abroad and have been responsible for increased remittances. However, we should have been able to use their potential within Pakistan, but that has not happened due to our governments not being able to create conducive conditions for them over here. We lament the brain drain, but like The Economist magazine said a long time ago, it is better to have brain drain than to have a brain in the drain. We have seen in Pakistan many dedicated and philanthropic people doing well and doing good for the public, but they cannot carry the burden of 220 million people. Only the state can. This government is doing things differently. We all hope that they succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, the situation that I have depicted may appear to be bleak, but if a country endowed with immense resources has not been able to rise to the level of a middle-income country in 7 decades, there's something seriously wrong. Also, if we ignore the reality and don't diagnose our problem correctly, there's no chance of finding the right solutions. The learned speakers that follow me would dwell on the situation we live in and would suggest how best to secure and stabilize Pakistan. I thank you all for your patience.
Of Hilal Imtiaz by the President of Pakistan in 2003. Since his retirement as the governor, he has been actively in Ishrat Hussain to put forth his valuable views on the topic of the seminar.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff, Air Chief, have been looking at the activities of this new institution. There are many think tanks, but this fills in a particular niche which was missing in the whole spectrum of the think tanks. So I want to congratulate Air Chief Marshal Sadat for taking this initiative. This afternoon, I would like to spend a few minutes talking about the global and domestic threats and risks to security. And my limited knowledge is confined very much on the interface between economic and political sides of this equation. I am not very well equipped or qualified to speak on the larger interface with other dimensions of security, which are multifaceted. So I'd confine myself to 5 major threats and risks which confront us on a domestic and 5 on the international. Let me start with the global. After 20 or 25 years of globalization, whereby the developing countries actually were able to move forward both in terms of economic growth, social development, as well as poverty reduction, there has been a serious setback in the recent years. If you look at the record of 1990s to 2008 or 2010, you would find that 1 billion people were lifted out of poverty as compared to 1990s. This is a remarkable record, unprecedented and unparalleled in the human life in this globe. The developing countries have now become a major player as far as the economic growth impulses are concerned. While the advanced countries have been growing at best between 2 to 3%, the average growth of the developing countries was about 6 to 6.5%. So this tilted the economic balance of power from the established Western Hemisphere to Asia. And the primary leader of Asia was China. And this shift in the balance of power, therefore, led to a retreat from globalization because it was felt that trade liberalization, integration in the financial markets, and migration from the developing to developed countries was actually at the expense of the well-being of the Western population. And that is a setback which we are facing today. The trade war between China and the United States is a manifestation of this anti-globalization move.
Ladies and gentlemen, commissioned in
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Air Chief Marshal Kaleem Saadat Saab, Dr. Israt Hussain, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening. I'm a pretty dinosauric man, but not as old as 1967. But having said that, today I come on the invitation of the Air Chief Marshal Kaleem Saadat, former Chief of the Air Staff, and President of the Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Basically, at the outset, I would wish to commend the efforts of this new think tank for its thoughtful and valuable contribution in a very short period of time. And today's attendance is a reflective of the same. I have noted a high level of participation, and I can see experts from across the spectrum. It is therefore my privilege to share my thoughts, views with this august forum. My discourse will today unfold in three constructs. I will try and say something about the global geopolitical transformations and as they affect peace and security to me, developments impacting South Asia's security mosaic, and therein Pakistan's quest for security and stability, and finally, suggest a way forward in this domain. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's world, which is engulfed by a renewed great power competition, is resulting in resurgence of hardcore geostrategy and geopolitics. This revival of the great power competition has emerged as the defining feature of the international system, creating a conundrum for global peace and security. It is visible through enhanced and increasing vicious competition in almost all fields. Nowhere more it is evident than the massive increase in military spending across the globe. And as was said before me, the era of absolutism is over and unilateralism is ascendant. Many notions known to us quite sacrosanctly, like the notion of the state's sovereignty, if not eroded altogether, definitely stands transformed and diluted. The autonomy of the state is being questioned through a host of new paradigms. The current chaos results from a contestation about the center of gravity or gravities. And because there is a split in authority and positioning of those center of gravity, there has been an imbalance in the international and regional affairs. Let me dwell upon this. The global economic and demographic center of gravity has decisively shifted towards the east, giving rise to wars and conflicts in many domains, including financial, trade, and currency wars. However, on the other hand, the global governance, global military, and global financial center of gravity is in transition. This has created a gray zone of power imbalance. This, when mixed with human and social constraints, have created a combustible environment. Disparities in economic resources and social influences are therefore growing. There is, as already said, an evaporation of globalization and a revision of international norms, posing challenges to structures, orders, and institutions to which we were so accustomed. The so-called global rule-based order is giving way to innovative means and selective application of rules through strategies such as coercion and lawfare, an international organization developed for nurturing peace and security with United Nations at its apex body, have at best been reduced to conflict management tools. These debating clubs, with power hold of the few, have lost real relevance to the real world. Strongman politics are dominant. Ladies and gentlemen, hypernationalism, protectionism, and populism are most definitely ascendant. Each has a cost. Each has a historical context. And this does not make a comfortable reading. This results in rise of xenophobia, Islamophobia, intolerance, racism, and all the other signs and symptoms of populism. Unfortunately, these symptoms have been made legitimate at times by ballot. This is indicative of chaos resultant from the process of societal transformation. Let me give you an example. Social media, introduced by some as a mechanism of promoting knowledge and solidarity, has proved to be just as effective promoting hate, paranoia, propaganda, and conspiracy theories. It has become a tool, if not a mega tool, for manipulation, Cambridge Analytica being a case in point. Asymmetry in terms of politics and economics is creating a lethal brew of social despondency, if not an outright revolt. And global geopolitics is moving more towards zero-sum paradigms. This is an unfortunate reality. All old structures relating to arms control, security, governance, trade, economics, and others, and regional structures like SAARC in our regional context, have either been abandoned or have become irrelevant. These 6 structures have created a dangerous construct of illusions and delusions. Today, there is a greater discourse on managing conflict, and as I said, lesser on resolving them. And relationships among nations are being reshaped and altered on the basis of regional and global politico-economic circumstances and emerging security concerns. Interstate conflicts are no more pure military to military or state on state, but it involves all elements of national and social power. The erstwhile wars and open conflicts are transforming into grey hybrid domains, which are non-conventional and less kinetic. In new political organizations and non-state domains is emerging, which transcends national territories and borders. This is a new reality. This is the new normal that we face and probably will continue to face. And last but not the least, nationalism has found an ugly new form and an ugly new meaning. There is a swing not only towards ultra-nationalism, but absolute religious ideological nationalism has become the new fire, driving the ultra-right wing, rekindling medieval instincts. Ladies and gentlemen, now a few words about South Asia. From a geostrategic perspective, South Asia region retains an enduring and perpetual importance, probably an increasing importance in the 21st century. This is due to the strategic location, natural wealth, demography, economic opportunities, and cultural and historical strength. And therefore, the external powers seek to engage South Asia countries in pursuit of their grand strategic interests. There is a sort of reincarnation of a Cold War with historical undertones but hard underpinnings. This is not an event of our making or even of our choice. It didn't have to be this way, but it is the reality, no matter how uncomfortable this reality is. South Asia is also impacted in current times, which is illustrative through shifting interests and realignments of power relationship. Regeneration of Russia and rise of China and India's potential growth has compelled a rethink in global strategy. China and Russia have now been declared as strategic competitors or even rivals. And India is a partner of choice in the China containment strategy. And therefore, a triangular power equation between the US, China, and India is shaping the geopolitics in South Asia. This China containment strategy has been accelerated and expanded to dent, degrade, and push back China. India has been assigned, and in some cases has self-assumed, the role of acting as a strategic hedge in the region. The notion of strategic autonomy is an artificial and superfluous construct. It is a smokescreen behind which the new great game is being played. Resultant strategic partnership with India are largely notions of strategic balance and economic domination, with consequent impact in South Asia and the adjoining regions. These geopolitical realignments have emboldened India. This has fueled her deep hegemonic aspirations. This has propelled the revisionist state of India into an accelerated mode of aggression and, in my view, military and political actions. This has serious consequences for the region in general and Pakistan in particular. The Indian military ambitions have also grown. An Indian military shadow has darkened over the landscape of South Asia. As per SIPRI, India's last year's military spending rose to close to 70 billion. This is more than double the combined military spending of all other South Asian countries put together, including Pakistan. India has therefore accounted for close to 9.5% of the total global arms import and has been the largest importer of conventional arms in the world for 10 years running. This pileup of arms, coupled with the Shastra Puja, is a sure recipe for a disaster in waiting. Ladies and gentlemen, this underreported, heavy Indian military spending is provocative and dangerous. It is even more dangerous since it is coupled with doctrines such as Cold Start Plus, proactive strategy, surgical strikes, or preemptive non-military strikes. All this is clearly aimed at seeking to create a space for war or application of a selective military instrument against none but Pakistan. The veil behind this strategic thought stands removed. These new Indian military doctrines are being drummed up as the new normal in military domain. This notion was attempted in the aftermath of Pulwama incident under a wishful thinking to find space for application of conventional force, be it limited in the realm of a sub-conventional war. It totally backfired because Pakistan rejected imposition of such a change by providing a matching response, thus making it not a new normal, but a new abnormal. This has left South Asia lurking in a dangerous no-man land. While to a rational mind, it is clear that there is no space for kinetic application of force, this is because the strategic balance and the certainty of it, that if India hits, Pakistan will hit back, and thus the logical mind must conclude that all disputes needs to be settled through talks on the table. But today, rationality stands challenged in South Asia. I shall explain. This is due to the fact that South Asian peace and security environment has a new and acute challenge. This is India rapidly gravitating away from secularism to majoritarianism through mainstreaming of fringe and ultra-extremist ideologies. Indian society and polity have systematically been saffronized through a reincarnation of a pre-medieval, racist and a fascist ideology, Hindutva, whose modern founding fathers took great inspiration from Hitler and Nazism and believed in their own sense of Lebensraum. This Indian revisionist mindset has gradually shifted from what was India to Hindustan to what has now become Bharat. But unfortunately, it is now trying to move towards an Akhand Bharat. Now, rise of this ultra-religious ideology, nationalism, in the form of RSS-driven Hindutva ideology, supported by Vishwa Hindu Parishad and Bajrang Dal, has propelled and intensified her quest for regional dominance. This has resulted in aggressive behavior. This also underpins her failure to resolve outstanding disputes and issues. This has opened up old wounds. Indian Muslim children today are being called Pakistanis by their colleagues, increasingly making 200 million Indian Muslims to look towards Pakistan. India has inadvertently opened up a Pandora's box. This makes Pakistan's quest for security and stability even more challenging. Ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of all issues in South Asia and its quest for peace and security is the Kashmir dispute. Kashmir has been turned into the worst human tragedy of contemporary era. I call it as the greatest moral crisis of our time. People of Kashmir have been denied the right of self-determination granted by the United Nations for over 70 years. And to suppress the legitimate freedom struggle, occupying forces are employing brutal use of force against innocent and defenseless Kashmiri civilians. Use of torture, rape as instruments of suppression, enforced disappearances and arbitrary detentions, and violations of basic human rights have become a new norm in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Over 100,000 Kashmiris have been killed, martyred. Over 10,000 Kashmiri women raped. Over 10,000 pellet guns victims who have suffered eye injuries and use of cluster bombs against Kashmiri civilians on this side of the line of control. Yet, the burial of the Kashmiri martyrs in the Pakistani flag is a testament for their love and everlasting affiliation with Pakistan. These atrocities and human rights abuses in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir have explicitly confirmed and have been condemned by various international organizations and even now mainstream media. Notwithstanding the brutalities already being committed against Kashmiri, India's racist and fascist regime has deprived over 12 million Kashmiris of their identity through abrogation of Article 370 and with the threat of converting them into a minority through a demographic change by abrogation of Article 35 alpha. This is illegal, illegitimate, and this unilateral action by India, disregarding the other parties to the international dispute, including the indigenous people of Kashmir, the state of Pakistan, and the international community, it is therefore unacceptable to both the Kashmiris and Pakistan. This Indian blatant attempt annexation of the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is a violation of the United Nations Charter and the United Nations Security Council resolutions, more than 11 of them. It breaches international law as well as bilateral and multilateral agreements. Leading Indians themselves have admitted what is happening inside their own country. This brazen attempt to bring a demographic change in its only Muslim-occupied state to prevent civilians from protesting against this barefaced violations of their fundamental rights. As I speak, more than 13,000 Kashmiri boys and more than 4,000 Kashmiri prominent persons have been picked up and detained, and only God knows where. India has deployed an additional 180,000 troops, supplementing the already 700,000 troops there for over 3 decades. Kashmir, which has become the most militarized zone in the earth, has now been turned into the world's largest open-air prison and a concentration camp. India has tried to cross the bridge. But let me tell India, this is a bridge too far. In fact, Indian action is tantamounting to a strategic miscalculation, as it has internationalized the Kashmir dispute. I will quote 3 examples. Elizabeth Warren, one of the Democratic front runners for the nomination in US, has said, "I'm concerned about the events in Kashmir. including a continued communication blackout and other restriction, the rights of the people of Kashmir must be respected. Another Democratic presidential contender, Bernie Sanders, also stated that he was deeply concerned about the situation in Kashmir. The Labour Party in UK, in its conference in Brighton, has passed a resolution that supported international intervention in Kashmir. This highlights the growing attention Kashmir is receiving from the world. All this has given a fillip to the indigenous Kashmir freedom movement. It has given vent to divisive communalism and internal conflict in India, with prospects to engulf regions beyond Kashmir. It has resulted in entrenchment of conflict between two nuclear-armed states. This has serious impairing prospects on peace, security, and prosperity in the region. To me, this current occupational policy in Kashmir is now following 10 strands. First, demolish legitimate resistance by force. Second, change political character of the Kashmir freedom movement. Third, make Hurriyat leadership irrelevant. 4, make line of control unbearably hot. 5, consolidate revocation of the Article 370 and 35 Alpha through a glare of economic incentives and low-level proxy warfare. Next, impose caution on Pakistan for providing moral, political, and diplomatic support. Next, ultimately make Pakistan irrelevant to the equation. Next, change demography to Hindu advantage. May I say the Brahman advantage. Next, change the ground reality and present a fait accompli. And finally, keep international community neutralized. These are the strands of the gorilla in the China shop. Ladies and gentlemen, to divert global and domestic attention from Kashmir, India is propagating several misleading, rather false and fake arguments, declaring Kashmir as an internal affair, terming it as a bilateral issue, portraying it as a country-specific situation, propagating normalcy in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and linking the dispute with cross-border terrorism. Defending a new constitutional status of Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir under the pretext of development requirements. If these arguments, ladies and gentlemen, are so valid, we would welcome India to try this on other parts of India. This is obviously a cheap fake to pressurize Pakistan. Indian political and military leadership has unleashed a hyped-up rhetoric on Kashmir. An Indian minister has said that one day they expect jurisdiction, physical jurisdiction of this part of this Kashmir. Similarly, the military leadership has said that this part of the Kashmir is their next agenda. This indicates the toxic ether currently infecting the RSS-driven New Bharat world, unbelievably dangerous to the core. Such and other actions and provocations only add to the complexity and longevity of the Kashmir dispute. But it will not only be detrimental for India and Pakistan bilateral relationship, but for peace and security in the South Asian region and even beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, now coming to Pakistan, because of our geographical existence in an arc of crisis, there has been a perpetual quest for peace and security. Pakistan, like every other country, strives to seek positive relevance to advance its national interest both globally and regionally. Since inception, Pakistan has been an ardent adherent of the United Nations Charter and a strong proponent of a peaceful coexistence. Pakistan has always played an active role in international peace and stability operations. However, normalization of security situation in South Asia remains hostage to a state's preference for hostility. This hostility digs at the very existence of the state of Pakistan, and actions are aimed not at conflict resolution, but trying to perpetuate this conflict. Pakistan's enduring and existential challenges therefore continue to emanate from this 7-decade-old challenge. But apart from these external challenges, our natural internal challenges have been compounded by playing a ruthlessly design-based destabilizing game, both on our east and west, and proxies such as the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Jamaat al-Ahrar, and other are only but recent examples in this case. The proverbial smoking gun is Mr. Gulbashan Yadav. These challenges and tribulations only add to our resilience and make us stronger as a country and as a nation. Thus, these recent actions and heightened bellicosity will not dent our determination or our quest for security and stability. Pakistan remains the gateway to several strategic directions, notably a link for flow of strategically important energy resources from Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia, thus making this wider region an area of enduring focus for world-leading power with often conflicting interests. Pakistan's relevance for major global power is an existential reality. It will be even more so in the near future. This is because convergence of interest in regional political security and economic connectivity as a geostrategic and geoeconomic pivot. But let me put before you the pivotal role of Pakistan in the future socio-economic domain of the region. The regional scenario in South Asia is influenced by contemporary politics of existing and emerging world power. This provides Pakistan with an opportunity to maximize its leverage in socio-economic domains. In the given context, CPEC has been rightly termed as the game changer for which Gwadar is the springboard. CASA 1000 provides the solution for energy-starved countries in the region. The IPI gas pipeline and the TAPI projects are Pakistan's energy aspirations. The SCO has acknowledged the growing significance of Pakistan in the region and beyond. I can see Pakistan as a gateway for regional and global powers for their economic interests. Pakistan is also likely to act as a hub of economic activities of South Asia, Central Asia, Middle East, and even to some extent China and Russia. Connectivity as a sequel in all dimensions is a regional common. Pakistan's future lies in formulating a collaborative approach for gainful dividends from both global and regional common. Therein lies the contours of future progress, manifesting our quest for security and peace. Ladies and gentlemen, now let me propose a way forward in only 5 selected domains: social, political, diplomatic, economic, and military. In social domain, we are an ideological nation with our roots originating from the two-nation theory. We need to preserve our culture and foster unity amongst masses while ensuring across-the-board religious tolerance. That is important. As enunciated in Paigam-e-Pakistan, a progressive, modern Islamic state as envisaged by Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and not a theocratic state of regression. We need to concentrate on stability and governance for the economic well-being of the common people. And above all, we need to strengthen nationalism, national pride and morale, and resolutely defend this with force. And when I say force, I mean moral and political force. In economic domain, we need to reinforce our system and strengthen our institution. We must cultivate consensus on all core national interests and adopt a comprehensive, apolitical approach to protect interests of the state, society, and individuals. In the diplomatic domain, the re-energized diplomatic overture towards balancing, rebuilding, and diversifying our relations must be sustained, capitalizing on our leverage due to positive geostrategic and geoeconomic relevance. We should continue to mobilize international community to foil such hegemonic aspirations in the neighborhood. Keep Kashmir issue alive and kicking till its peaceful resolution as per the aspiration of the Kashmiri people and in line of the United Nations Charter and the United Nations Security Council resolution. Pakistan should continue to fully support and energize the UNMOGIB mission in India and Pakistan to highlight the atrocities being committed in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Similarly, Pakistan should reinforce its positive role in Afghan peace process, which has kindled a new ray of hope in that war-ravaged country. In the economic domain, it must be highlighted that economy remains the weakest link of our national security architecture. Economic recovery is most vital requirement for defense and security of our country. There is a need to develop human resource and industrial base to improve our exports. We must focus on indigenization by improving technological capacity and promoting innovative skills. CPAC can become the engine of growth, which Pakistan needs to lift itself out of the present economic morass. However, there is a need to keep these and other elements non-controversial, as some inimical forces want to make them controversial, and remain focused on achieving required benchmarks in the earliest possible time. And finally, in the military domain, the strands of preparedness and readiness as displayed on the 27th of February must continue to be maintained. Should our adversary again try to challenge the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the resolve of our nation, it will surely face even a more robust response. In strategic domain, we have a policy of full spectrum deterrence within the precepts of a credible minimum nuclear deterrence. This must be kept dynamic in view of the evolving strategic landscape in the region. We should not indulge in an arms race. We will not indulge in an arms race, but we will maintain strategic balance in South Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, we need to intervene in history and reposition ourselves at an advantage. We need to protect our core values and interests. Preservation of our ideology and enshrined human values based upon the true principles of Islam must remain our guiding beacon. Fostering Pakistaniyat and patriotism should remain central to all our endeavors in our turbulent history towards peace, stability, and prosperity. Our destiny will be determined by our actions. And to translate the aspirations of people of Pakistan and the vision of our founding fathers into reality, we need to have confidence in ourselves and trust in our abilities. Now, results of these endeavors will only be as great as the courage of our conviction and the sincerity of our purpose, rooted in ground and policy actions. Rhetorics will not do. Pakistan's quest for security and stability have to be from a position of strength, morally, politically, diplomatically, militarily, and finally, the most important of them, economically. I have no doubt that with sincere efforts, we will achieve our goal and secure a prosperous Pakistan. Inshallah, we can. Inshallah, we will. I thank you all. Pakistan Zindabad.
I request Dr. Guest is departing. Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, the tea has been served by the sidelines. Kindly help.
Etc. The second country that they mentioned was Russia. A asserted Russia. And President Putin went on record to say that the breakup of the Soviet Empire was the greatest geopolitical disaster. And he vowed to his people that he would ensure that Russia regains its rightful position in the world. Of course, the United States also had North Korea in mind. And of course, he also had Iran in mind. So these were the sort of things. But obviously, it was during the time of President Trump, where these countries have now been identified as enemies, or as competitors, or as rivals. And the United States is not prepared, is not ready to accept any challenger. This is the crux of the matter. And US has already, since the 50s, has already had a very unique bilateral and multilateral defense security alliances with a number of countries. And the arc begins from Korea down to Australia. And now, of course, they have a new recruit, and that's India. So what we are faced with is a very complex geopolitical situation. And clearly, the focus of the world, as was also referred by the chairman, there's a great transformation from the west to the east. Asia is now a region, or I would say Eurasia is an area or region where the real competition among the great powers is on the way. And this is what makes things interesting. It was Harold Mackinder, Admiral Mahan, Brzezinski, and Dr. Kissinger who had focused on this region, on Eurasia, and had said that this is the future chessboard of the world. And this is where the games will be played. Now, when we used to talk about, historically, about Russia and Britain, and, involved in a great game, that was a picnic. Nothing really happened. But now what is envisaged is a very serious situation. So, the focal point of geopolitical contest is going to be Eurasia. Why has the United States involved India? Every American president, barring or except the Eisenhower administration and the Nixon administration. These are the only two US administrations they had lukewarm relations with India. But Kennedy onwards, and right up to Trump, there is what you call a very significant effort to woo the Indians. And India and the United States have slowly developed what you call a very sound strategic relationship. It was President Bush Jr. who initiated it with the signing of the nuclear deal, and then, of course, in 2008, they gave them the waiver on NSG, and then subsequently, things moved in the Obama and Clinton, on Indian soil, declared that India is in the making of a superpower, and the United States will contribute to the development of India as a superpower. So, when Trump came, initially, he also made his efforts, but he hasn't been to India yet. Obama had been there twice, Clinton had been there 2 or 3 times, and of course, high-level visits between India and the United States have been on the cards for a long time. The point now is that US has clearly decided that India is their strategic option in this region. And India, too, has, to a large extent, despite all the criticism from various quarters, has also embraced the United States. And you look at the significant number of US military agreements, several of them, including LIMO and CASAS and a host of other things. And the important thing is, the United States is prepared to sell anything to India, anything. Whatever India wants, it's basically, it's a question of money. Secondly, they are also willing to transfer technology, which is clearly an important aspect of this relationship. Thirdly, sophisticated hardware, not only planes, aircraft of all nature, including C-130s of the most, upgraded quality, and the large troop carriers, helicopters. So what is India going to do with all this equipment? As we all know, and many of you are from the armed forces or you have served in the armed forces, you know that 80% of India's deployment is against Pakistan. All this equipment that they are supplying to India is not going to be used against China. So that is where the Indo-US relationship stands. And of course, that trade is growing. It's now in the region of about 100 billion. The balance of trade is in India's favor. And this is a bit of a gripe for Trump at the moment. And he's been talking of some degree of, reversing the tariffs, etc. BRI. Now, BRI is actually a geo-economic and geopolitical answer to the pivot Asia, or now what they call the Indo-Pacific strategy. And if you read the US reports that have come out in the last year or so, and the current report on this very subject, clearly identifies India as a key partner of the United States, common interests. And interestingly enough, they have even talked about other South Asian countries, including Nepal and Maldives and Sri Lanka, but Pakistan is not mentioned at all. So clearly, as I said, there is a very straightforward decision on the part of the United States to keep India, and this is where the crux of the matter is the policy of containment of China. Now, BRI is a huge transcontinental project. It's not confined to China or just the neighboring countries. The Eurasian continent, from the Pacific to the Atlantic. And similarly, China has Africa in mind, China has even Latin America in mind as part of the BRI. And already China has spent about $1.27 trillion to develop infrastructures along the Eurasian landmass and the corridors. And Pakistan, of course, Pakistan-China, the CPEC corridor is one of the flagship projects for China. So BRI is not only a sort of an economic effort, huge infrastructures all over Asia, and you can see the results. I mean, I was in a small town called Yiwu when I saw a train leaving from there and going right up to Madrid in 14 days. So China has plans of putting fast trains, not only for passengers, but also for freight. And these will be moving at very high pace. So these are some of the things that the Chinese have in mind. Now, BRI is being opposed by who? Basically two countries. At the moment, 122 countries have shown interest or have signed up or have established contact with China that they seem to be interested. But two countries, basically, India and the United States. And United States really doesn't have, or has been trying very hard to persuade Japan and other countries to participate in some kind of an answer to it. But at the moment, it seems that they're not really getting very far on it. Then on the defense side, not only the system of alliances, but they have this Quad, in which India, Japan, Australia, and the United States are partners. And this is supposed to be a very serious move, but there are also some reservations, because United States is saying this is going to be on the basis of partnership, which means you'll have to contribute money to get this thing moving. Now, BRI, eventually I think China has plans to spend between $6 to $8 trillion. And this is not a project of a year or two, it's over a decade, or maybe longer than that. And that's quite a lot of money to be put across. There are some voices, even in China, who are saying, well, maybe this is too ambitious. But the interesting part is that China and Russia are basically seriously cooperating on this thing. Because you see, if you look at SCO, SCO is neither a NATO nor is it a European Union. So the basic strategic understanding is going to be between Russia and China on the development of Eurasia. Now, as far as we know, China has never entered into a military alliance with any country, an actual military alliance like the Americans have with their allies, or even a multilateral military. China is not part of that. But clearly, they do understand that in order to prevent the United States from pushing them, the two have to cooperate in the region. And really, the world order, the way the United States is looking at it, US wants a unipolar world, but a multipolar Asia. China wants a multipolar world, China and Russia want a multipolar world, and maybe a multipolar, shall we say, Asia. Because I think they also realize there are other countries in the region that are likely to become important in the future. So clearly the battlefield is set, and Pakistan, of course, is a very important country in the context of its strategic location, as the chairman had mentioned, and of course Afghanistan. And you can only go into Eurasia through this area. The shortest route to Eurasia are through Pakistan. Now, you see, not only Asia has the most populous countries, 8 of the 10 largest militaries are in Asia, then 8 nuclear powers, and some of them neighbors. I'm saying 8 because I'm including Israel in it. So if you look at the situation, all the hotspots that are likely to flare up at some stage or the other are in Asia. North Korea, or the Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan Strait, East Asia, Japan and China, and of course, South China Sea. These are the main focal points. But there are some other interesting factors. During the Cold War, United States and the Soviet Union had serious ideological issues. Now, this is not true in the contest between China and Russia. Then secondly, China and the United States have developed dependencies, economic dependencies. Their economies are integrated despite the trade war that one sees at the moment. And China is far more pragmatic than the Soviet Union was in its heydays. So these are some interesting factors. As far as US-Iran relationship is concerned, there's a long history. And in this complex game, it's not only the US and Iranian factors. In this complex situation, at the heart of the thing is Israel. United States is deeply committed to the security and safety of Israel. And not only that, there are some wealthy wealthy Arab states who are actually sleeping partners of Israel today. Therefore, the situation is very complicated. If there is tension in the region, if there is a war in the region, it will have a very serious impact on Pakistan. We are neighbors. Iran and Pakistan are neighbors. That's the first thing. Secondly, it'll, the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran has its own dynamics and can impact on Pakistan because of the demographic, sectarian sort of situation in the country. Most of all, we'll suffer economically. A lot of our people are working in the Gulf area. Secondly, oil. Our trade will be very badly affected. So it's actually in Pakistan's interest to see if we can contribute to a better understanding between USA and Iran, and in the case of Saudi Arabia and Iran. And I wish Prime Minister Imran Khan good luck in his effort to bring about some degree of, shall we say, reduction of tension. Whether he succeeds or not is another matter, but it shows really that Pakistan has taken a certain initiative which will help peace and security in the region. I don't think we lose very much if it doesn't happen, but if the war takes place, then of course there are huge factors for Pakistan. Finally, let me talk about the new power centers. Of course, the United States remains one of the major countries in the world, no doubt about it, because it is still militarily, economically, technologically, the most powerful country in the world. And there aren't any close competitors at the moment. Even China itself says, we are strengthening economically. In fact, according to IMF, China has already overtaken United States in PPP terms. China is now 27.1 billion and US is 21 billion. But in the other, if you use the other formula, the US is still 21 and China is like 17 or 18. But this is the economic strength of the Chinese. Militarily, they are modernizing. Big time, they are modernizing. And I think the recent parade that, I don't know how many of you saw it on television, was very impressive. The new range of weapons that the Chinese are developing. Now, this is not the only area which is going to be a focal point of tension between the US and China and Russia and the United States. Cyber technology, cyber warfare, all these things are now new factors that are causing, shall we say, a deep stir in how the world order is going to shape. In my opinion, USA, of course, remains the principal country, China, Russia, European Union. These are the most important power centers. There's no doubt about that. purely because of the economic power, also because of the military strength that these countries have. Then I think there are, shall we say, there is a second category of power centers. In Latin America, it's Brazil and Argentina. In Africa, it's South Africa and Nigeria. And of course, India is a very serious aspirant. So I think there is a two-tier world order, which will be a multipolar order, but these 4 or 5 countries will remain the principal, shall we say, driving factors. Now, what should Pakistan do? We cannot abandon our solid, flawless strategic relationship with China. That's the key. Pakistan, US strategic, there's no commonality and there are no common grounds. But United States is a superpower. And we have no choice but to live with the United States. And I would say, don't go back to an old relationship. Seek what you call a working relationship with the United States. Don't overcommit to the US, because then you are in that syndrome of doing more for them. Afghanistan, do as much as you can, help, but don't burn your fingers. We don't really have many choices here. Respectfully, I disagree with the Chairman Joint Chief of Staff. I think there are limited options for Pakistan. Even in the current situation, there are limited options for Pakistan. But it all boils down to the key, and that is how strong you are at home. How strong is your economy? How cohesive are you? But if you were to go by what we saw, I saw it on television, the joint session of the Parliament, I'm sorry, it wasn't very inspiring. And what seems to be in store in the coming days, again, is far from inspiring. And you imagine what and how the Kashmiris are looking at it. They are in an extremely difficult situation. I'm not supposed to talk about India-Pakistan relations because it was not supposed to be in my... But Pakistan needs the China relationship. We must improve our relations with Iran. Of course, we have good relationship with some of our Arab countries. OIC has not shown much support in the context of Kashmir. I'm not sure that we are in a position to give them an injection that will revive OIC's, shall we say, fundamental support for Pakistan. Well, I would just like to end here, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker this evening is Dr. Abed Qayyum Suleri. Dr. Abed Qayyum Suleri is a renowned public policy specialist with a special eye on economy. He is a member of different policy-making forums and advisory boards, including Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Pakistan Climate Change Commission, and the Trade Policy Advisory Committee of Ministry of Commerce. He has also served on 3 judicial commissions formed by the Supreme Court of Pakistan, Islamabad High Court, and the Lahore High Court on environmental issues. He also served as the member of Board of Directors, Pakistan State Oil. Dr. Suleri is heading Sustainable Development Policy Institute. He is also editor-in-chief of the SDPI, peer
at a global level. And now let's try to zoom in, and I'll start from where Honorable Ambassador Riaz Khan left, that we need to bring our house in order if we want to increase our options in order to meet those macro challenges at a global level. Now, the 4 or 5 points which I am particularly asked to touch upon is talking of a national agenda, talking of institutional strengthening, governance, interprovincial harmony, and accountability. So I'll try to live within these 5 themes. But I also wanted to somehow set the scene that what are the conundrums in which
but with example of a society which of course established itself as a global player. Natural resources, and although I've mentioned water, and water has been mentioned before here, but yes, surely do you preserve them? Do you use them effectively? How well do you take care of them? How well do you exploit them? And as just mentioned, water as one of the examples. Economy, is it growing? Is it integrated? Is it producing jobs? Is it creating wealth? If that is the kind of economy, then yes, that is an element of national power. And if not, then of course it is an element of national power which is actually taking you down. And military must be compatible. There's no comparison in terms of correlation of forces, etc., etc. It must be compatible to your needs. It should be lethal. It should be able to do its job. That is how you must define your military strength. Now, that is what I tested this particular format of the 5 traditional elements of national power against the various examples that exist. I then posited, and this I've been doing for the last so many years now, teaching at the NDU and other war colleges across the country and other places where I lecture on national security. I suggest that we need to change those 5 modules. Perhaps you can keep them as well. There's no harm in it. But perhaps the new elements of national power assume far greater importance. Are we a knowledge society? This is something that Dr. Ishrat Hussain mentioned. What sort of a society are we? Knowledge economy, but knowledge economy actually has now progressed to what is called a knowledge society. Are we educated? Are we able to produce? Are we profitable? Are we a productive society? Do we provide or enable equitable socio-economic opportunity? Because then only you can have a cohesive society. And a cohesive society is a strong society. Are you providing equal opportunity with the example of what Dr. Ishrat Hussain told us about the 3 cities and the 26 other districts of various parts of Pakistan, and the inequality index that exists on these comparisons? Obviously, that's not the case. Are we integrated into regional global economy? Movement of goods, wealth, trade, ideas, tariffs, etc., etc., services. Is that what is going on in your country, or you're isolated entirely? Innovation, ideas, research and technology. Are you producing new things? Are you patenting new things? Is that something that you're depending on the world to produce and then give it to you? If not, well, you're not as strong or as or worth your weight in terms of where you stand. You looked at all the figures that Dr. Umar Saif told us. 4th in this, and 8th in this, and 6th in this. But unfortunately, when you look at all this, that is where we lag terribly. And military capacity, of course, is something that I said needs to be. Now, this brings me to the point that what is the way forward, quickly, going forward, what is the way forward to try and see how can we find or live in peace? Obviously, with India, it's never been possible in terms of how, I assume that, like I said, there has to be a foundation of steps taken vis-a-vis India, and if we come to that state, or in preparation of that stage, we need to begin to do something with ourselves so that we can become more attractive to the region first, and then perhaps India, within the same region, has to establish a more normal relationship with Pakistan. And one key game changer that I find, and thank God the Chinese for this, and thank the Chinese for this, is what is called, of course, the CPEC, and we know all this. Now, if you look at this, if you look at this, I call this the body. Consider this the body, a human body, for example, and you have this line of CPEC communication, roads, railway network, etc., running north to south, from north to the south. Call it the spine of Pakistan. So this body of Pakistan has a spine in the form of CPEC. Spine is an important part, of course. It keeps you stable, it keeps you straight. I go on to the next one, which says that if the base of this spine was right here, and I can